Welcome to the Unwanted Fraternity Podcast. Greg Tonkinson here along with my wife and co-host Jennifer Tonkinson, and we are at Tonks Pub. Again, always at Tonks Pub. We enjoy the ambiance and the environment, but particularly like the conversation. Well, we are right in the middle of talking about counseling, and we've had people on that have gotten counseling. We've had counselors on. We are so excited to bring to you yet another special guest. But before we get to that, I want to just reach out to you one more time and tell you that we have been so fortunate to partner with the Herzog Foundation. The Herzog Foundation is built on the premise of providing resources for youth pastors, parents, Christian educators, administrators, anyone who has a platform to minister to the next generation. And we've all been there. We've all looked around and thought, man, if I could just gain some more resources, some more tools, where could I find them? Well, Melior, the podcast, Unwanted Fraternity, the podcast, we have partnered with the Herzog Foundation on their podcast network, along with about a dozen other wonderful resources. If you're interested, go to herzogfoundation.com/podcasts, and you are going to find a bevy of resources that really will help you in ministering to that next generation. Well, like I said, we are in the middle of talking about something that probably is long overdue. We've been on the air now for about 3 years, and we should have been talking about this a long time ago, because so many members of the fraternity have either been in counseling, they want to get counseling, or they have a lot of questions about counseling. And yet, where do we turn? When you add to that, Jen, the fact that we're all putting our kids in school, our kids are away for 180 days a year. Now we've added another layer to this issue of counseling by way of, well, who's going to help my student when they're in class? Who's going to minister to them in a unique way? Something that is probably a lot of teachers feel this burden, like, I want to do it. I don't have the training or resources, and especially the time to do it. So how do I do this? Well, we are blessed today to have on the show Chizzy Anderson, who is with Valley Christian Schools. And Chizzy is the coordinator of spiritual wellness and
Health.
There you go. Thank you, Chizzy. Chizzy has been doing this for a number of years, and we are blessed to have her because we have so many questions for you, Chizzy, about not only what you do, but really laying the foundation for why you do what you do. In other words, let me just start with this. Why do we need this job in Christian education?
Well, I think that it's necessary to have someone on the campus that can be a liaison between the student and what they're trying to say and do, and what the parents are hoping will be a support for the student in order to help them be able to move smoothly through schoolwork so it doesn't hamper it. We do have sometimes a little bit more of a lack of resilience, and so I think to help with that middle ground between having something occur and then having them continue on in a victorious kind of way. Excuse me. And to have them just be able to continue with the goal, which is school.
And that's what to me is fascinating about this, because we had on last episode a professional counselor, a therapist. She's got her training, got her master's and all that, but her full-time job is just to work with clients. A lot of them are teens, but there's a transaction that happens. Like, you're paying for that service, right? And so there's kind of like, our son went to counseling, and so there is a responsibility, but also like that's what that person does full-time all the time. What I love about what you just said, Chizzy, is you brought in the fact that, no, this is under the covering of their primary responsibility, and in this case at Valley Christian, which is to get an education. And so you step in and say, okay, I could probably book my schedule 24/7 with students that just have issues, that want to talk, want to get through things. But on top of that, your goal is to get them back into the classroom and to be successful in the classroom.
Yes.
Is that challenging when you're looking at their primary goal may be, hey, I just want to talk to someone that is wise and can help me. But your primary goal is, yes, I want to help you and talk with you, but also you're here to get an education.
Yes, I have a whole range of students. We have some students who know that, and so they come a little bit reluctantly to me because they're just like, I just need to get my work done. And so then they're at breaking point by the time they come. Of course, we have the other end of it, which is students who are just like, I'd really like not to be in class, and this is a approved way to not be in class. So I usually have to sort that out as I'm talking with them. Yeah.
But you have, like, even if they're on that other end where it's like, man, I just, it is an excuse to get out of class, they're not going to just hang out in the courtyard or in the student center. Like, they're going to talk to someone about their problems. Have you seen an uptick in, because I just think when we were students, I mean, there were guidance counselors.
Yeah, for college or getting your academics.
Yeah, academic guidance counselor, but I don't remember.
I can't remember
too many, like, people in Chizzy's position.
No.
It was like, hey, I want to talk to you about mental health, about.
We didn't really talk
your
about mental
upbringing.
health, I don't think, as
Yeah,
much.
it was just kind of, and so here we are. I would say, Chizzy, you're probably one of many in different capacities at schools that focus solely on the mental health of our students. In your time at Valley, have you seen an uptick in people requesting that?
I feel that when I stepped in, it was already high. It was a little bit like behind in terms of being like, they really needed a female advocate on campus, someone that was a liaison, and the position didn't really exist before I got there.
Right.
And so trying
you remember
to,
that?
what did you say?
I remember that, yes.
Yeah. Navigating it and trying to figure out exactly what it should be shaped like. I ended up more on the, I'm passing pertinent information to the right people, groups, departments, so that the students and their parents can reach their goal or reach the help that they actually need. And yes, it does rise, but it honestly, for our school, it kind of depends on the year in terms of the combination of students that I have. I do think that there is, of course, a massive rise in the weight and pressure that students are having to carry at an earlier and earlier age, and that seems to be coming in combination with a less and less resilience to be able to carry it. And so those two together, plus sometimes maybe a little bit of a lack of home support, meaning some people feel like they are in a Christian school, therefore I can remove my hands a little bit. So if you put all that together, you end up with a little bit of an uptick. Yes.
When you say they come with a little bit different kind of baggage, I guess you could say, what do you mean by that? Like, are there, like nowadays, they're different than they were?
Yes.
Like you've seen a difference?
Yes, I would say that right now, if I was just going to go to like a really negative side, it would be that a lot of students feel they've hit their max very early. And therefore, they feel like this went wrong, and then I had this type of a day. And then my parents said this when I got home, and that's it. They don't feel like they can go to school the next day. It moves so quickly towards a type of self-harm, whether it's in thought or behavior. And so it goes so quickly to, I cannot handle this, and what should I do to get out of it? And instead of being like, that was a rough Thursday, or it's been a bad week, it's been a very difficult semester, the expectation to climb back out of it is not as high as I would prefer to see. So they end up with sort of I need to step out of it, like remove me from the situation instantly. And most people can't do that. You can't really just stop school or not see any of your friends. So if you need some kind of control in terms of how to handle what you don't want to see anymore, that you need to stop right now, the ability to go towards harming oneself is like a sharper, quicker, shorter road, I would say. And of course, there is the uptick in the awareness for mental health, about mental health, and so that's good. It has a lot of pros, and it also has some cons, because sometimes I think people start to take phrases and use those, and they aren't necessarily looking to get better. Sometimes they are just wanting to name, and so in doing that, that's what I mean by the range of people that I have. Some people are like, I've got it, I don't really need any help, but maybe I need just a little bit of help today, and other people sometimes are more like, I need help every every day, and I can't do this.
So it's almost like they've not been taught the coping skills
Yep.
as a child. Like they haven't been allowed to get into a situation of conflict. And so is that where you're seeing is that what you attribute it to?
Yes, I see it a combination of not being able to cope with what they're seeing. It seems like the training for the ability to handle a situation and know that you will come out on the other side. That part seems to be missing. It is as if everyone is aware that they will have a difficult situation, but they expect it to mark them for the rest of their lives. I hear that a lot when they say, the reason I fill in the blank is because of this thing that happened to me in third grade, fourth grade, and therefore I can no longer fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And so trying to rewrite that just because you can name it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to stay there, you know.
Are there
Wow.
any, I mean, we talk, Chizzy, a lot on this program about divorce. We talk about death. In your experience, in your position right now, dealing again with primarily ninth graders up to 12th graders, how are they responding to such massive trials and events in their life that are super traumatic? In your experience, when they come, is it internal, is it external, a little bit of both? How are teens responding to because it's one thing when, you know, like, and again, there's all levels of, like, if you go through a breakup or something, you know, your parents yelled at you or whatnot, but if your parents come home and they say, hey, we're gonna split up, or hey, Aunt Jane just passed away or whatnot, how are you seeing teens today respond to those?
I would say that those two, if I were going to divide them, I would say divorce on one end, which is brings a type of grief, and then death on the other end. So focusing on the divorce side of it, it's interesting to watch. There is a lot of self-talk of this can't be that big of a deal because so many people have gone through it. So there's a lot of confusion. I noticed that with divorce in particular, the students do tend to go a little bit numb, like, well, it is what it is. I guess this is how it's going to be. And trying to figure out, maybe they do a lot of parental defending, I've noticed. Not necessarily to me, it's almost like out loud. Like, I know they love me. I know they really tried. I know it's been really difficult for my mom. I know my dad's having a hard time, you know, that kind of thing. It's like they're trying to make sure people know, like, effort was put into this, and they just have to handle wherever it's gotten to. They do seem to try to remember how to behave. Like, how are other people behaving? Therefore, how do I behave? What do I need to do to make this work? There does end up being just some of the maybe physical fallout, disorganization. Going from house to house is no joke.
That's so hard.
No joke. So even in things like dress code, I've had students who completely forget. Like, I have students who have specifically said, I don't want to rebuy all my clothes, so I just take them from house to house and house to house. And maybe a parent is saying, you need to have those things at your father's house or your mom's house. And they don't. They're even just that, bringing it and being like, oh, I forgot to do laundry. I'm stuck in pajama pants. Disorganization with school in terms of, like, who actually is speaking into their education and how they handle it. So they're having to navigate all of that. And then they can't usually seem to, like, nail down their emotions. In a lot of cases, of course, there's bleed over from the parents' emotions during the whole thing. So the students are trying to be loyal to both, generally, unless there's, like, a very, very harsh situation where they feel obviously like, you know, my mom shouldn't be involved in this, but it's never just clean cut or, you know, cut and dry. So that's.
Hey, because I think a lot of our listeners, especially in Christian education, will be interested. Either their school has a position similar to this, doesn't have one similar to this. Again, we're talking to Chizzy Anderson here with Valley Christian Schools, and Chizzy is the coordinator
of student health and wellness. Yes.
Coordinator
of student health and wellness. Yes.
And so for those listening, and Chizzy, they're looking at their school thinking, you know, gosh, I have so many questions for her. I wish I was sitting where Greg and Jen are sitting. Can a student, can they just show up and get a date with you and parents not be notified? Or because we're at a different level where we're dealing primarily with minors. And it's not typical for a minor to go to a professional counselor, primarily because of the financial
Yes.
cost, where parents wouldn't know. But in a school setting, can a 16-year-old just sign up or knock on your door? And then if that's the case, what is your responsibility by way of parental notification?
That's a good question.
Yeah. We've had to navigate that carefully. Generally, the parents know. I have a lot of people whose parents send them to me, or they will call and leave a message. I have one particular type of message that I always say I don't do, which is if a parent says, "Can you please check on my son?" Also, don't tell him that I called you. I always say, "Oh, I'm going to tell him because I would like him to know that you care." But for me specifically, working in a Christian school, one of my favorite ways to minister to a student is to have them just be laid on my heart. And I find them, and then I tell them, the Lord really laid you on my heart. What's going on with you? So to look like I happened upon them kind of removes that.
That's good.
You know
Like
what I
that
mean? So I
strategy.
really
Yeah.
do like to let them know. When the student comes in, we do discuss if we're going to be talking to their parents. Sometimes they're just coming in for some support, for some prayer. If that's the case, not really a big deal. I don't go in and tell their parents all the time. I have parents who specifically say, "Please don't tell me everything. I want them to know that they can trust you."
Yeah.
And I'll say, "Well, I can adhere to that sometimes, but not all the time."
Yeah.
I'm very clear with the student if I'm going to tell their parent. I just let them know this is heavy, or you need your parents at home to be aware of this. Some of them say their parents are aware, and then I'll say, "Well, I'm going to double check," you know? So I generally do. I have a lot of students whose parents know. I have a couple that are like, "My mom says I need to talk to somebody. She doesn't know I'm talking to you because then she'll think she's right," you know? And I'll say, "Well, she was right." So yes, but generally I think most of the parents do have an idea. And I do hear at different places like sporting events where parents will say, "I heard what you told my daughter the other day." So that also makes me happy when the student voluntarily goes home and shares something, especially if it's not like a situation that is mandatory reporting or anything like that. And that is good. Yeah.
And so we want to talk about strategies for sure, but
Yeah.
logistically, because I know a lot of schools will be listening to this thinking, okay, if I create that position, do you have set times for these kids by way of like, hey, I'm going to give you 30 minutes max, or I'm going to give, because again, they're not paying for this service. And, in a regular counseling session or a therapy session, it's 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 30 minutes, and there's a hard stop because of the financial obligation. But in a school setting, I could see this becoming, hey, you've been here for
Spend
3.5
hours with
hours.
Cheesy.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to minimize, like some things just take a lot of time to unpack. So tell us a little bit about time, an average amount of time, but also frequency. Would your recommendation for schools that don't have this position be, hey, 6 sessions or the whole year, or how many sessions can a student get in this type of job?
Yes. So some of the limits I use are, we definitely try not to book anything unless it's not over a core class. So in other words, not to minimize fine arts or art, but if I have checked in, I check in with the teacher and I verify that it's okay for me to pull them. I generally take them maybe the last 15 to 20 minutes of a class period. Depending on if we're having a half day or something. And so when I do that, it helps break it at the point of the bell. And then I know, like, very rarely are they having a non-core followed by another non-core.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I end up being able to say, well, that's the bell. We have till this time, and then give them a pink slip because they're usually just a little late, and then they head on to their next class. There are times where if I am revisiting something or someone told me something and I need to pull a student, I do use that rare occasion to pull them from whatever class they're in after I make sure they're not taking a test and so on. I have multiple ways of reaching the teachers, and if I must do it, I will have them called Like I will have the front desk call in to the room, but that's extremely rare because the reaction of being called to the front, no matter what it's for, causes a ripple. So I try not to do that. But usually I'm contacting the student by email, and then I'm contacting the teacher by text and email just to let them know and make sure that it's verified. Since the phrase, "we're not doing anything in class," is what a lot of students will say. And you're like, of course you're doing something in class. So I do try to limit it to non-core, and it's about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, of course, we fly well over that, especially if once they're sharing with me, which a lot of it comes out cold. Like, I don't know what you're coming to talk about. So if it's really, really difficult, we will take longer, of course. But if it's so difficult that they're a mess by the time they're done, then usually that's the end of the day for them. And we will need to bring in a parent or say, like, pull yourself together and then call your mom, and you need to drive home, since a lot of our students do drive home. But a lot of them will feel better after speaking, and so they can try to finish the rest of the day.
And will they do, a month's worth?
How long do you? What are your boundaries?
Worth? Like, have you ever reached a time where it's like, okay, I love what we're doing here, but we got to kind of like.
Well, and I'm sure too that you want to like assess, does this person need professional help outside of school too? So how long do you give sessions?
Usually by the first or second, I can assess if they need help outside of me. A lot of students will come in just for one thing and then they're fine. But I have some students maybe at the complete other end of the spectrum where their family support is almost non-existent, or there's enough trauma going on in the family as a whole that I will check with admin, and then I'm seeing them about once a week for the majority of the school year, because our school is one of the only constants. That does not happen too often, but if we are, it does help me to be able to look at them and have eyes on them and have them know they can trust us to help them make it through successfully through school. And so, but that's a pretty high level for me to be able to continue to see them. But generally we try to stop at around 3. But like I said, a lot of people just need me that one time. And then other ones are, maybe a little bit more often. So sometimes we'll do a semester. If there's something someone is going through and we're waiting for it to be resolved, then I'll see them maybe once every 2 weeks.
Do you meet with male and female students?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Yep. I mean,
because I know that we have you as our female dean kind of thing idea, but I didn't know if we used another male male person at the school to.
We have some other people that they speak to, but yes, I have a lot of boys that come, in my direction. I definitely have more girls than boys, but yes, I do see males as well.
Have you ever like shared something with a parent, and even if the parent knew that the student was going to come see you, but the parent was surprised at what was being shared by way of like, has a parent ever been surprised that their kid was dealing with something? They may have thought it was this, but it was really more of this, or because I'm just thinking like, if like that would be an interesting / awkward / confusing conversation that my kid's coming home and the coordinator of spiritual health and wealth or
wellness,
not wealth. Yeah. That's a different
episode.
Health and wellness is calling saying, hey, just want to let you know I had a great conversation with Sarah. And we talked about these things, and she's kind of working through this, and the parent's like, wait a minute, I didn't even know she had a boyfriend, or I didn't even know, she wasn't
that'd be
feeling
awkward.
that, or whatever.
Yeah. You reveal, but whoops, I didn't know you know that.
There's a long pause.
Yes, that's exactly what happens is the long pause. I have to think before I pick up the phone. If the student is aware, which they usually are, I do ask which parent they would prefer. I do ask that. Okay. Sometimes someone will say, hang on a second, let me get my husband on speakerphone. I'm like, all right. I do start right away with I generally chipper voice so that they don't freak out. I mean, it's a call from the school. And then I have to assume that they may not know. So I'm coming at them with something that they may be completely shocked. So yes, there are sometimes fully awkward moments. Sometimes the awkwardness is coming from, I didn't know you knew, about this, right? Like they didn't know their child was talking about it. And other times it's just like, what? Like which child? So trying to help them understand and also lay out that there's grace, that the Lord is here, that I'm coming as a conduit for support and help, and that we will do it however we need to. And also trying to explain what is their role in something that they hadn't even thought about. So I do, sometimes I will have an extremely long parent conversation because sometimes they'll call me back or they'll say, I've never dealt with this before. What do I do? Yeah. So there are tears, confusion, sometimes really strong volatility as they're sorting through it. And I just basically have to navigate on that phone call, like how it needs to be and what their next steps are. And if there are any other resources I can present to them. Sometimes there's denial. And then I have to decide if I need to push because I know what I heard and I know what I saw. Right. So there are times where, for example, someone maybe took what I said a little more lightly. Like, I think maybe that's an over-exaggeration. At which point I said, well, then I'm going to send you the screen capture from their phone. And then they're like, oh, so I don't usually just drop that on them. But if there seems to be a problem with them getting the information out of their student, sometimes it takes some maybe encouragement. I have had parents in the past that say, can you just tell me what's going on? She never talks to me. In which I say, I would really love it if you would try harder to do that before you come back to me. I will verify, but it would be great if she talked to you. And so sometimes I will go ahead of the student. They'll say, I am going to talk to my mom tonight. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to call your mom and tell her you're going to talk to her tonight. And so, but I do a lot of shock for parents sometimes, and that makes me sad. But I have learned how to speak in such a way that they can understand that we're here to help.
It's such a great, our school is one of the initiatives both last year and this year, and even moving forward, is to partner with parents. And I see this aspect as just such an incredible way to partner with parents, to share with them, hey, we're on the same side. Like the goal is to equip your student to become a culture changer for Christ. But in doing so, man, we got to work through some stuff that they may be going through. In saying that, though, that's like on paper. What you have to deal with, I mean, what you just shared, I'm exhausted by what you just shared. And so Chizzy, I just have to think, like, how do you, in this position where a lot of it's confidentiality, a lot of it is you look at students much, much differently than teachers do, than other staff do, because you know stuff that none of us know. And you can see dozens and dozens of students who have crossed your doorway that are sharing some intricate, deep, complex things. You've talked with parents, maybe they're responsive, maybe they're not. And so your head has to just be swimming with, like, there's the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. Like, we see the tip of the iceberg and you are privy to some stuff that really can't be shared in, mass quantity. How do you do self-care? How do you not go home and just, vomit all over the place in terms of venting? Or I wouldn't even know how to do that. And so for those that are thinking, man, we need a position like this, what would your advice be to them in terms of, okay, now that you have someone, here's what I would recommend in keeping them? Because if you don't do these things, you might just lose them.
Good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. I will say that is my weakest area, in all honesty. I think part of what helps me do the job well is also what helps me not carry it well. At times I have to go home and share with my husband without using any names. And I'll just be like, this is what I heard today. This is what a student shared with me, and so on, just so it comes out of me, because I have nowhere to put it. Even in telling their parents, sometimes it doesn't relieve me. We're going to see them tomorrow. I'm going to see them when they're doing that thing, and I know it's coming from this, but the teacher doesn't. And so how to liaison between them and the teacher and let them know that there's stuff being worked through, but it's not done, So I do end up walking with that weight a lot, especially because I feel like to do my job well, I do need to remember where I left off with them. So I take copious notes, which means I'm like digging really deeply into it. I want to hear where they are so I can see if there's a difference the next time they come in, Is it worsening? Is it getting better? especially in situations where I didn't need to involve the parent, let's say, right away, or I involve the parent in a light way and they feel, okay, we've taken care of it. And you're kind of like, oh, there's some more layers. I don't know if you want to hear me ever speak again, but trying to make sure that I can see clearly. The Lord has given me really high observation. So sometimes I can see past what someone is saying, like what they've actually said. And that part I think is the heaviest, because I am not just waiting for you to tell me what is happening. I'm looking at it and I'm either drawing it out without trying to dig up things, or the Lord's just showing me like this needs to be said. And so I'm saying it and praying that it's going where it needs to go, and that whatever isn't, shouldn't get planted, so I do a lot of, wow, I hope I said that with the right tone. I hope that I shared that in the right order, that if they repeat what I said in their minds, that it comes out the right way, that I didn't mess anything up. And so that part is very difficult. I'm already a self-assessor all the time, like, so this job sometimes is, my husband will laugh sometimes. He's like, wow, because it pulls out that side of me. So I do a lot of praying, and sometimes I've had different suggestions about things to do to take a mental picture of closing a box and being like, I'm done for the day. I've worked very hard this year to try and finish at my end time, but generally I'm not done. And in my effort to finish, I will be there for many, at least a couple hours past my actual end time, because I'm trying to end that day so it doesn't carry into the next. But that doesn't really help that happen. So trying to be like, I'm finished for today. This is my max, and I'm going home. That has been difficult for me, because I just think if I push a little bit more, I think I can squeeze in some more. And people are really in need of help. And so it is hard to be like, I'll see on Thursday, when they look like they're dying. So assessing even that, how much of an emergency is it?
Fridays are tough.
Oh, yes.
I'll see you on Monday. That's 3 days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So sometimes they're all trying to get in there as quick as possible because the weekend is coming. Same with end of school year or right before Christmas break and things like that. So,
I know, even end of school year, they're headed home for 2.5 months or whatever. And who do they talk to?
Exactly.
And because you're not going to give out your number. Please don't, you don't want to do that.
I try not to.
But that's when you really do want to involve the parents. And so I do have a question. If you could tell parents, this would be healthy for you to start practicing at home when your child is going through divorce, or when your child has trauma from losing someone. These are healthy things to talk about, healthy things to practice. These are the routines that are probably going to set your child up for feeling like peace at home. Yeah. What would you say to parents?
I kind of have a variation of things. I would say a lot of parents seem to say to me, oh, I wasn't sure if he was feeling that way, but I didn't want to ask, or I didn't want to maybe set them up for that, they don't want to bring it up. So I call it poking the bear. It's like they didn't want to poke the bear, but just because it's lying asleep doesn't mean it's supposed to be asleep. A lot of these traumatic experiences, I've noticed that the students will say, I don't want to bother my mom, or I don't want to bother my dad. So the tendency is to keep it back. If it's something that isn't necessarily something they've experienced in trauma, but maybe the result of a really bad decision, they also don't want to bother their mom or dad, because they say, I know what I did was wrong. And all they're going to do is say, you shouldn't have done this, that, or the other thing. And so they're like, that whole conversation is going to be absolutely useless. So I would say, go ahead and poke the bear, gently check in. How are you doing? It doesn't have to be a long, crazy conversation, but find out if they're doing okay. Expect it to take a minute, because I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. 11:40 or so. No, I'm not okay. PM. I mean, then you're standing there against their door jamb till 1 a.m. as you're trying to figure out what is it? It might take a few days and so on. Also, I would say acknowledge if there hasn't been a pattern of sharing in your family. Many students say to me, I would talk to them, but we don't talk about this kind of stuff. I would talk to them, but we don't pray as a family. I would, but we don't do that. So many of them say that. And I try to say, you can also change that in your family. It's difficult because you're not the person in charge in your family.
Right.
That I would say, as the parents, acknowledge, like, yeah, we don't normally talk through things like this, but let's do it for this situation, or from now, or newly, change that pattern. It doesn't have to be like we never do that, so we're not going to do it. I would also say schooling your features. It's a phrase I use with my girls. Like, there are times where what is the wrong response? Like, it is shocking, or it might be upsetting what your child's about to tell you, but at least handling it, even if you have to tell them, give me a second, I gotta breathe, I gotta walk for a minute and I'll be back. But to be able to, the amount of students that tell me they're afraid of the initial reaction, or just afraid of a breakdown or deep anger. And I know that's common, of course, but I think sometimes it doesn't always have to be that way. So schooling your features, watch your shock face, just a little bit. Not like, oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. You don't have to fake it, but maybe just try and think like, okay, for them to get to the point where they're going to tell you themselves, and not because the school is calling to say, we have footage of your child doing blah, 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 that's a pretty big step. And so I would say that's what it is. And then at the very bottom of it, trust the Lord to provide the resources for your family to navigate the yuck. He knows that it's happening. And so he has a way laid out for you. So asking him for grace, and then having him show you what are those ways. Is it financially for counseling, therapy? Is it through other people? Is it, meeting and talking to the right person, reading the right book? Those things, the Lord knows that they're there, and he has given you the ability to, and the responsibility to raise, to train, and to comfort and nurture your child. So there's no way he's going to get to this point, as scary as it is, and just leave you hanging.
Right.
So just to be able to trust the Lord, even if that's not a normal stance for a parent, but hopefully in being in contact with our school, it would be something that they would be like willing to try, as scary as it is, to trust.
Really
good,
practical, and yet super helpful, just tools. I think, as parents, it's never a problem till it's a problem, where I'm walking into a situation and I'm faced with, I've never dealt with this, and wow, like, here are some practical things I can live with. I think of Chizzy, when Paul says, bear one another's burdens. Like, you are truly doing that, and we are forever grateful for that. But give us one or two success stories, because I think that when we hear these, our minds go to, holy cow! Like, one, there's a lot of things going on beneath the surface, and two, they just seem unredeemable. That it's never going to work out well. Help our listeners with, no, it actually, not all the time, but every now and then, like, you get blessed by seeing some progress or fruit in some of these students.
Yes. Sometimes the best fruit is that they don't come back.
Wow.
Not that I want them not to come back, but there are times where it's like they forget, and to come to see me. And I love that. So every once in a while I do have like kind of a list I go through, and I will email and I'll say, just let me know how you're doing. You don't have to come in, but you're free to pop in if you need to. And they'll say, I'm doing really well. I'm doing much better, or this and this finished. And I did make it through the surgery. My dad's fine. The diagnosis was better than we thought, like all those things. Right. So those are good. I think maybe seeing students finish, graduate, successfully move on is another thing that can be, it's like, I will be honest, and some of them I'm like, praise the Lord, but yes, and it's great. But also just seeing the different choices they make further down the road. I have some girls at different points throughout the time that I've been at the school for the last few years that were like made some really obvious and public bad decisions, let's say, that they really regretted, and working with them to simultaneously be growing away from that, while knowing that the ripple effect is going to stay for a while. Some of those have really turned it around. It took some of them up to 2 years for the people around them to forget that that's not their identity. And we talk through working really hard by the grace of God to keep rewriting what your legacy is, rewriting what your reputation looks like. And I really like seeing when a lot of effort has been put into it, a lot of tears and checking and crying and then being mad because people just won't let it go and things like that. And seeing them now, some of them, and just seeing that they are like, okay, they did rewrite it. They did run for that position and get it. What people say about them and describing them is so much more triumphant and victorious, and it leaves behind the other things that they did, and they then even use it as part of their testimony. And so that's like awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's so good to, like, I think for all of us, teachers and faculty and staff alike, when you're in the doldrums and it's just like you can't see the silver lining, you can't see the light, you can't see, because you're just burdened with all of these hits that you're feeling or taking. When you get that moment of, wow, like they're doing better, they're growing in the Lord, they've turned the corner in this area of their life, they've repented, maybe they've gotten through some stuff, and just to know, hey God, whatever small part I got to play in that, like, thank you. But to hear feedback, or to, like you said, to get some notes or whatnot, that's got to be what keeps you in the game a little bit of, hey, I can get up tomorrow and do this because this person just reminded me. No, with God, all things are possible. Like, this is like, even in the most dire straits, He has the ability to provide for them, to heal them, to give them strength. And He uses people like you, Chizzy, to play a part in that. But we always have to remember we play a small part. God is the one who grows, and He does it according to His timing. And so I am so grateful that, I'm selfishly grateful that we have you at our school. What advice would you give as we close here with you today for schools or homeschool cohorts, or maybe private Christian schools or whatnot? What advice would you give to them if they don't have this position? How can they start this position? What would be some steps they could, now that you've done it for a few years, your advice to schools that don't have this?
I would say maybe just assess when and where that position would be implemented. Ours is during the school day, so I am there as at the same time as the teachers are. Of course, I can stay a little bit later, but I am not someone who, let's say, arrives at lunch and stays till 5. Okay. Sometimes I've thought about, like, do I just need to stay a little later? And I do sometimes, but not generally. It's like, this is, you need to make sure that your parameters are set. What is your role as a school? And I think it's best to remember that the goal is for them to, you find that fine line between having school be part of the consistent thing that helps build their resilience while they're going through that, and knowing when maybe it's tipping them a little too far and school is needing to be, like, just tweaked a little bit in how they do it, and or paused. We have people who have said, like, this isn't a good time. I am going to pull my student, not in anger, but because we really need to focus on her health. And that's happened, and that's great. Thankfully, it's a little bit more rare. But be willing to assess the situation and feel it out, because the position is there, but it also, shifts a little based on the particular culture of the school. And if you have a larger student body, you're probably going to need more than one person, or you need to be working in tandem. It needs to be someone that communicates really, really well, but also is super discreet, is what I would say. That's like the two things. You need to know who you're talking to, and who can help the student reach the goal. So when I'm done, I end up speaking to the Dean of Academic Advising. If we're working with grades or assignments, if the person is drowning, they may need an email that goes out to all their particular teachers to say they just need some grace applied for the next 2 weeks. I'm reaching the vice principal or the principal, and so on. So it needs to be someone who communicates very well. I would say also that you need to decide as a school, what is your line, like record keeping wise. How long are you keeping those? Make sure that they're very clear on what mandatory reporting looks like for your school. And you might also be working with security. I do a lot. And regardless of what sort of circle you're in, I think probably one of the hardest things is that my job then bleeds into discipline, which is very intriguing to do discipline and this type of thing. But I am either the one that's hearing something that needs to be reported, or I am helping someone walk through something, or they've inadvertently told me something, and so trying to figure out how to pass it on. But it's not usually always a pass on. It's also me. I was in there and heard it first, or I am the girl, or like I'm the female, so I'm in there, or parents wanting to speak about things from racial things to male-female relationships, and so I end up being in there as an advocate, as a listener, and so on. So it is kind of I want to say a globular job. So if a school is looking towards that, I think they need to really set some pretty stiff boundaries and then be willing to adjust them as as you see the needs in the school and so on.
And probably you need someone that also, like you said, communicates, but I would say even has that relationship with faculty, because again, you are a school, classroom is core, and so to have that person like really lift up academics to say, hey, I care about this, and the goal is not to get the student out of academics, it's actually to get them back in where they can be successful. And so, wow, that is so good. And I'm going to take some liberty here, Chizzy, so I apologize, but I really don't apologize. Listen, if you are a Christian educator, if you're an administrator, if you're a faculty member that you're not a part of Chizzy's school, but you've got questions by way of, man, how could we start this, or could we do maybe part-time and ramp up, or Chizzy's email is on our website. You can go to the faculty page, and I think I speak for Chizzy, like she'll give you our playbook, what works for her, what doesn't, because we want this to be successful for your school. We want this to be successful for your homeschool cohort. This is, to me, a top priority position. Like if you're looking at budgeting and how do we do this, I would say create this position if you haven't already, and then use people like Chizzy who has lived it for a few years now. Hey, here's what works, here's what doesn't, here's what you need to think through, just exactly what she was saying. But I think Chizzy's available for that. Just inquire. And again, this is not silo, right? We're not trying to be the best here. We're trying to spread the wealth. And so, Chizzy, what you're doing at Valley Christian is so valuable. I've got to think there are other schools out there that think, man, how could we do that? So my final thought is, because you're on this and other schools will hear about it, you can't go anywhere.
Right.
And so you are locked in. So
I did. She came by my classroom.
You're not applying for other jobs out there.
Sometimes Chizzy gets to come to the junior high campus. We are, just so you know, we're not on the same campus. And she came in the other day to grab something after chapel. And I said, hey, maybe you could be part-time here next year. And she's like, I love that, and yet I don't think that's going to work. But gosh, and I just hear like junior highs need also. It's starting so much younger.
Yes. Very much.
Kids, like I think it is because kids are really struggling with how to cope, and so having someone even at the junior high level,
definitely.
we need somebody to do that. So. Anyway,
it's been so good. Chizzy, time flies.
Yes.
We're out of time, but thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on Unwanted Fraternity, the podcast. Remember, when you're going through things, trauma, grief, pain, suffering, our tagline, which is so true, is you are not alone. And this show in particular is the epitome of that. There are people out there that are just trying to be used by the Lord to help you. And so remember that you're not alone. Please, please, please don't hide your pain and suffering. Talk to people about it. People like Chizzy, Jen, myself. There are people that God's going to place in your path that want to know your story. You just have to be open enough to share it. And so remember that. We'll see you next time on Unwanted Fraternity, the podcast.